It's Dr. Greg Popcak this morning, and without the wheel. There are problems in Vegas. All wheels have been recalled at this point. We have no idea what's going on. Dr. Greg, welcome. I want to jump right into this. Big things happening in and around the media right now, late night hosts, all those things. It takes us to this question of comedy. Where is that line between comedy and abuse, verbal abuse?
That's a great question, and actually, it might surprise you and a lot of listeners to know that there's a whole psychology of humor. In fact, the University of Colorado Boulder, Dr. Peter McGraw heads up the Humor Research Lab, which doesn't sound funny at all when you think about it. But they study things like how humor benefits well-being, what makes things funny, and I think that was an interesting thing to kind of consider in light of Jimmy Kimmel being indefinitely suspended, Stephen Colbert's show ending, and there's a lot of kind of pushback on this, with people saying, well, it's not free speech and whatever, and that may be, but the more important, interesting question to me is, where do we draw the lines between what's funny and what's actually abusive? And it turns out that there's this theory called benign violation theory of humor, where in order for something to be funny, there are lots of different things that do account for humor, but one of the things is that it violates boundaries, but in a way that feels safe and playful. But when somebody's attempt to be humorous doesn't feel safe or playful, and it's a boundary violation, then you feel threatened. And it relates to the big question of why certain comedians might not be all that funny, and in fact might be appropriately taken off stage. But it also applies to our regular day-to-day relationships. If I tease my wife, right, if I make a joke at her expense, but she knows that I love her and she feels there's some underlying sense of love even in that humor, she's going to laugh with me on that thing. But if I don't communicate that sense of basic love, respect, or empathy, either in our relationship as a whole or underlying that little joke that I tell, then she's going to feel hurt or heartbroken, and I'm going to come across like a bully. And that's really the difference between verbal abuse and comedy. A lot of times, even in marriage counseling, I'll hear from a client, usually a guy who says, well, I was just joking. Yeah. But really what they're doing is they're wearing a mask for being abusive. Because in order for something to really be funny, it has to be a benign violation of those boundaries or social mores that feels safe and playful. And what makes it safe, again, is that sense that the person telling the joke has at least some basic respect, positive regard, or empathy for the person or group they're telling the joke about.
Do you think part of the issue with what we're seeing is that we're so kind of ideologically separate from each other that we don't trust or believe that someone loves us when they say something? If it's something we don't agree with, we just say, well, yeah, like let's take Jimmy Kimmel, for instance, right? He's making comments that would offend people's ideologies on one side, and so they don't think he cares about them or that they can relate to him. Yeah.
And of course, it's it's a comedian's job to be somewhat offensive, at least. But again, going back to say our personal relationships. If I have a good friend, all right. So my birthday was yesterday, right? And I had a friend comment. Thank you. But I had a friend comment on my Instagram post about my birthday. Boy, you're really old now, Greg. Now I know he loves me, right? And I know we get along really well. And I wrote back to him, takes one to know one, geezer. Yeah. Right. And,
right.
And it was funny because he knew I cared about him. Right. But if I didn't know he cared about me, or if I didn't think that he basically respected me, if somebody I knew didn't like me commented on my birthday post, boy, you're really old now, I'd be hurt by that. It's because it's the same joke, but it's all about my knowing where the intention comes from. I think a lot of what's happening with the comedians, especially the late night comedians, they've lost a sense of basic respect or empathy for the people that they're poking fun at. And it comes across because it's not sounding like a joke. It's sounding like a scold or a lecture, or like these are derogatory comments against the people that they disagree with, intelligence or basic human decency or basic humanity at all. And so what ends up happening is these folks they're making quote unquote jokes, but really they're just being verbally abusive when wearing a mask of a jester.
And don't you think good comedy is something that a lot of people can relate to? I'm thinking like one of the hottest comedians out there today is Nate Bargatze. He doesn't talk politics at all. It's all family kind of life and about him, and
Well,
people can
that's right,
relate
yeah.
to that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think that I watched his comedy special recently myself, and even when he's picking on his marriage or his kids, he's the butt of most of his jokes.
Right.
But even when he teases somebody else, you can tell that he really loves them and he respects them and he cares about them. And so it's funny because we can all relate to that. The people who we love drive us a little crazy, but we still love them, right?
Right.
But it stops being funny at the point where we stop loving them, where we stop conveying any sense of empathy, stop conveying any sense of basic respect, and now we're violating those boundaries, but in a way that's not benign, that's not kind, that's not friendly, and therefore not funny.
Yeah. Now, look, Nate Bargatze and his joke about his wife in the airport is like that story is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. So, but let's say every once in a while. But look, a lot of people use humor, including me, to cover up for their lack of confidence, their lack of intelligence. But really, sometimes it can go to that very nasty side, right? And so we've got to be careful about that. I would think even in the Christian community, Dr. Greg, I've seen it where you think it's friendly, but it really does turn a bit ugly, and you hurt people's feelings, and you don't even realize it.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's why I think that it's a good idea to kind of have that habit before you make a joke, especially make a joke at somebody else's expense.
Right.
To just sort of take brief stock of the relationship. Are we in a good place? Do they know I love them? Do we feel close to each other and connected with each other? Because if we do, the joke will probably land. And if it doesn't, I'll have the opportunity to correct myself and we'll get along just fine. But if we're not in a great place, if there is tension between us, if they're not sure that I love them or we don't feel connected, then maybe I should keep that joke to myself for right now and just work on the relationship because it's probably not going to land all that well.
Yeah. It's kind of like reading the room, right? Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, that's exactly what reading the room is. Yeah, great point. Thank you.
It gives me a great opening with, I work with Dave Eschers every day, and now I know the boundary.
Yeah, I know you love
me,
me,
I could
Ron.
go a lot
It's okay.
farther than I have.
I know you love me. We're good.
Dr. Greg Popcak, thank you so much.
Thank you,
a
Greg.
wonderful
Thank
pick today.
you.
That was great. Yeah.
Terrific
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.